Hello, Regent Park. My name is Kedar Ahmed, and you're watching rptv. We are thrilled to share a story of transformation, community engagement, and the future of urban living right in the heart of our neighborhood. Innis College Urban Studies program, the Center of Learning and Development, and Mothers of Peace hosted Designing for Regent Park and Planning for Change on March the 5th at 660 Dundas Street East on the 3rd floor at the UN Urban Pavilion. Led by Sara Abdella, a Regent Park native and urban planner, completing her Master's of Science in Planning at the University of Toronto. The event explored the impacts of urban revitalization and community safety. Sarah's unique blend of academic insight and personal experience shed light on navigating the challenges and opportunities of urban renewal in the Regent Park community. And now, let's go to the event.
Hi everybody, my name is Sara. I am currently doing my Master's in Urban Planning at University of Toronto, and my CIP, which is my current issues paper, or my thesis, is on Regent Park and design and how the two intersect with revitalization and safety. I think my paper is really important, my findings are really important because they affect phases 4 and 5, and they would allow for recommendations to be heard from the community in an academic perspective, which I don't think is as common as the rest of the feedback gathered from Regent Park is. Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Welcome. My name is Sara. I am currently a student at the University of Toronto. I'm doing my Master's in Urban Planning, and I'm in my second year, which should be my final year if I pass, so pray for me. My passions are design, safety, community engagement, and housing, and I'm excited to be here today. So this is my presentation. I'm going to be presenting my CIP research. That stands for Current Issues Paper, which is basically the equivalent of a master's research paper. So I'll be presenting my research and findings with you today. The purpose of my presentation is to connect with my community, which is you guys and the reason why I do what I do, basically, but also to gather your input. If there's anything you think could help me along the way, please let me know. I'm going to be walking you through my table of contents. It may look a little hefty on the screen and a lot of things to go through, but I can talk really fast. So if I see people nodding off, don't worry, I can wrap it up pretty easily. If you have any questions at any point, please don't hesitate to ask as well. Just raise your hand and I'll be happy to answer to the best of my ability. To begin, I'm going to be discussing my personality. So what drew me to researching Regent Park, and most particularly why design. I'll also be talking about the purpose of this paper, so what the intended output of this paper will be. I'll then go into Regent Park's history, my methodology, which is my approach, the literature on design theories, and then I will be discussing my statistical analysis, surveys, interview themes, findings, and final discussions. You may be asking why Regent Park, why design, and more importantly, why me? Regent Park's revitalization project has now spanned nearly 2 decades and may have many years left before it finishes. It was not until I began studying urban planning that I began to connect the feelings of growing safety I had experienced in Regent Park to the design changes in the community. For this reason, I analyzed and connected changes in perception of safety to the changes in urban design. As you can see from the images, I've been in Regent Park my entire life. The image at the bottom left corner is me when I was 7 at Art Heart, which still is in progress, but it's not in a basement of a building anymore, which is really nice. The video is up on YouTube, which was a jump scare to find out when I was in my 20s. Okay, and the picture next to it is where I basically grew up as a child. It wasn't my first home, Regent Park. That was where the Freshco now stands, but I was very young and don't remember it much. So this is where I have my former years and my former memories. My apartment was in the window to the corner over there, and I remember having stray cats warm themselves up in the winter in my apartment, which was nice. And then the picture next to that is me all grown up, which is side by side with where I live now. So I've been moved around because of the revitalization a few times, but I do love Regent Park, and I think the biggest thing in what I see is the design changes, and that's why I focused on this. So I'm embarking on this project to analyze my community's perception of safety while navigating their lived experience throughout the revitalization. It is important to note that my design alone cannot tackle the root causes of crime. My goal is to provide my community members with a space to comfortably express their experience in Regent Park as a means to inform design planning in a manner that I was not able to, which is higher education. My hope is that this research will be presented to members of TRIDEL and design planners involved in phases 4 and 5 as an additional method of learning from the community. The goal is to incorporate the experiences of residents more thoroughly into the final phases of the revitalization. I want to be clear that my research is not arguing that Regent Park residents nor myself have felt consistently unsafe in the neighborhood. This is also not a critique on the development of phases 1, 2, or 3. Rather, the goal is to investigate how perceptions of safety have changed, in what ways, how, and why, and how to move forward. So my research question is up on the board. I ask you to keep this question in mind, and if you have any personal ideas that may answer this question, please come to me at the end and we can discuss. I'll give you a moment to read it and internally reflect. This paper intends to investigate. I can go back. Sorry about that. Okay, I will be. Is everyone all read the question? Do you want me to read it? I'll read it aloud as well. How have the approaches to urban design throughout Regent Park's revitalization changed the perception of safety within the neighborhood? This paper intends to investigate Regent Park's residents' perspectives on the built form and design features utilized by designers, developers, and urban planners involved in phases 1, 2, and 3 of Regent Park's redevelopment that claim to address safety. The goal of this research is to create a set of recommendations for planners to inform how to approach safety in master plan revitalization projects. Just a question for the crowd. Raise your hand if you know about Ebenezer Howard's Garden City theory. Okay, thanks. So the initial 1949 redevelopment development, I would assume, of Regent Park was inspired by Ebenezer Howard's Garden City and City in the Park concept and Le Corbusier's Radiant City theory. The design scheme included extensive building setbacks, the elimination of thoroughfares and open space between buildings with little direct connection to major streets. The intention was to liberate land for community purposes by providing sunlight to dwellings and protecting the community from disorganization of the major intersections. However, the housing design was unable to address the needs of the population. The very design choices that were projected to elevate Regent Park from slum status resulted in it being the reason why it failed. Regent Park became alienated from the surrounding neighborhoods as its expansive green space led to confusion surrounding the boundaries of public and private property. Howard's theory relied upon land speculation and the growth in land value. As a result, the Garden City was unable to translate to Regent Park due to the lack of financial viability. In this way, design operated as a solitary component to the redevelopment of the community, rather than a function intended to support the growth, safety, and financial rehabilitation of its members. As a result, the design theories and execution enabled petty organized crime and social isolation to develop in Regent Park shortly after its completion. The goal for this revitalization is to prevent the reoccurrence of crime and deterioration in the community. My hope is that it can be achieved, at least in part, by design. So the pictures over here on the left show the theory or the image of the perfect garden city, and then right beside next to it is Regent Park in the early 1980s or late 1980s.
In the 1980s, do they do consultation or how do they come up?
I don't believe it was a requirement, because right now in the city of Toronto, if you were to develop in a neighborhood, it's a requirement to have at least one public consultation. If you want to do more, that's up to the developer. It's necessarily, you don't at all have to in any way, shape, or form. So I'm assuming that is new and is not part of, an occurrence prior to the 2000s. I think they just kind of focus mainly on best practices in the North American areas and theories from really established writers. Now they do have the mandatory at least minimum one public consultation meeting, but a lot of people like Daniels did a lot more than they were expected to, and that produced a way better result in Regent Park. Did I do this? Okay. In 2003, the Toronto City Council approved the revitalization of Regent Park. This project was to be completed by TCHC in conjunction with Daniels Corporation in Tridel over 5 phases. The new developments included a mixed-income housing design where subsidized housing renters and market condominium renters resided in the same building. The completed project intended to feature a mix of rent geared to income, or RGI, units, affordable housing rentals, and market rate condominiums. Regent Park presented as a parcel of land in downtown East that held an abundance of unlocked land value. The land value potential provided a strong incentive for the city to move forward with the revitalization project. The revitalization process did not occur without pitfalls, as the initial process required mass displacement of the population. During the process, residents were relocated to other public housing projects throughout Toronto with the right to return to Regent Park once phased development was complete. However, many of those who were displaced did not return to the neighborhood. In phase 1 specifically, 56% of families did not return post-relocation if they were relocated outside of Regent Park. The focus on safety played a key part in the number of community initiatives that arose alongside the development of built form. Phases 1, 2, and 3 of Regent Park redevelopment incorporated several initiatives that focused on improving safety within the neighborhood. This involved safety walks, where TCHC employees and Regent Park residents would journey through the community together to identify safety barriers. Areas that required lighting, repair, or cleaning would be identified and later addressed. Additionally, the Regent Park Stakeholder Table was a key component to the establishment of the Regent Park Social Development Safety Plan, or the SDP. The table consisted of residents, agency partners, local networks, and city staff who worked in collaboration to provide the 2018 document that informed community planning or aided in community planning. In 2019, the table relaunched to address the following key themes in the community: safety, empowerment, local development, community building, and communication. The SDB focused on ensuring social inclusion and social cohesion of residents throughout the revitalization process. One of the primary goals was to create the reality and perception that Regent Park was a safe space for everybody. So this is a question for the group. I would love if you guys would answer to the best of your ability, but I was wondering, how do you perceive safety? How do you define your own safety?
So we could take our kids to school without not worry about it, and go in the night if you need to buy stuff, without not any stressing out.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer.
Not hearing the gunshot.
Mm-hmm.
I define safety in the community by knowing who my neighbors and community members are.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that the person beside me that I live with is reliable. If I had any emergencies, I could contact them, stuff like that.
Like a strong community network.
Mm-hmm.
They have access more for the teenager kids community develop. That's
Yeah, so more places for young individuals to reside and hang out, basically, socialize. Yeah, go ahead.
Eyes on the street and lots of light.
Safety for me is like the freedom or ability to be your true whole self without fear of danger or repercussions.
Mm-hmm. And by your true whole self, what does that entail to you?
Your religious beliefs, showing up as you would like to be seen by the world.
Okay. Amazing answers. Thank you so much. A couple of the points you made are covered in the rest of the presentation, so yay! So I, in my paper, define safety specifically based on the joined kind of conjunction of what I heard from the community in my methodology, but also from academic articles that define safety in their own way. And I kind of combine those in a form of quote unquote best practices or best understanding in a way that would specifically counter to Regent Park. So the ability to feel secure in your lived environment is important and can be categorized twofold. First, in the physical manifestation of crime, and second, to the qualitative understanding of perceptions of safety residents feel. According to an article by Urbanic, which is a writer who talked a lot about Regent Park, they discussed themes of neighborhood restructuring, public housing, and violence in Regent Park. According to them, crime has significant negative effects on both the individual and the neighborhood. If community members have a negative perception of safety, where they believe that their security is at risk, for instance, research has found there to be physical and psychological withdrawal from the neighborhood. So if, for example, I felt that I was unsafe in my neighborhood, I would stop going out as much as I do. I would stop engaging with my neighborhoods as much as I do. And that creates a cyclic effect, in my opinion. So in this way, it is significant to separate the perception of safety and qualitative understandings of safety. If a community were to engage in high levels of statistical crime, and these are a lot of big words, and simultaneously experience strong negative feelings regarding their perception of safety, there is a high likelihood that both factors of safety are influencing one another. Therefore, distinguishing between the perception of safety is necessary as it addresses a specific fabric within the community. So to break this down, there is a quantitative understanding of safety. So this is crime data. This is what police members or police officers see when they see a neighborhood, but it's also a qualitative feeling of the community. And that is my paper, which is the perception of safety. And what I found, what I'll talk about later, is that those two things don't always align. The safety of community members is important to define and understand. And considering these interpretations, this paper defines safety as a collection of the following attributes: a personal feeling of protection, a lack of perceived risk of bodily harm for oneself and loved ones, and low levels of reported crime. In this way, both the qualitative and quantitative forms of safety are taken into consideration to sufficiently investigate the connection between crime, design, and perceptions of safety. So, part of my paper was looking into policy, and while I didn't get too in-depth about the policy and design of Regent Park, I did find a lot of old documents from 2005 about how they based their design from, and I was able to compare and contrast what I found to previous design of Regent Park to the current design of Regent Park. So as you can see, the top of the left is the new, the top of the bottom is the old, etc., etc. The redevelopment intended for new streets and laneways to include pedestrian routes designed without dead ends to decrease the possibility of entrapment. Location of building and residence driveways, entrances that consider public safety on sidewalks by minimizing the potential for pedestrian car conflicts. One thing that I found in my interviews as well that I thought was really interesting and specifically related to new streets and laneways was that a lot of the time in the previous Regent Park design, there was no escape. So because of the design of Regent Park, where it was a lot of enclosed community design, which intended to encourage community facilitation, what people found was that when crime happened, you would have to go the longest route, which is the only route to escape that crime. And so when we were talking about new streets and laneways, that was introduced to prevent that from continuing. Large setbacks and stepbacks, which are basically distances from the right-of-way or the road to the actual property, were observed to allow for deliberate distance in towers from major intersections. This characteristic would allow for pedestrians to feel less encroached upon by the surrounding built form, increase visibility of surrounding space, and form stronger barriers against the right-of-way, so more protection between your individual self, the road, and the property. The separation from the street space and the pedestrian space decreases the risk of car danger, thereby increasing feelings of safety. So this kind of focused on street safety specifically. The themes of corridors and courtyards focus on incorporating developments that contain residential units on the ground floor with gardens as the transitional space between building and the courtyard. The units and gardens could be at a slightly higher level to create a sense of transition. This was designed to incorporate eyes on the street and promote feelings of safety through natural surveillance. So the main difference, as you see in the picture on the left, is that the courtyard is specifically straight with and level with the building. So what happened was that the green space there was an undecided factor of who was able to use it. Was it private for the residents? Was it public for the rest of the passengers or the street users of Toronto? It wasn't really clear. In comparison, the image at the bottom, there was a clear transition between the street and the property through the steps and the increasing of units, like leveling, which was found to be really useful. Point towers were strategically positioned in several locations on Dundas and River Streets. Point towers are basically when the city or the master plan identifies the highest point in the community where the towers can start from, and the rest of the towers would level off from there to create a natural kind of rise and aesthetic look. The locations were carefully chosen to minimize their impact on the established residential neighborhood to the north, west, and south. So, as I said, a clear transition between all areas. This redesign would prevent a design similar to the Garden City that divided South and North Regent Park. A lot of the times when I talked with my interviewees, they mentioned that the division between South Regent Park and North Regent Park was very stark, specifically because South Regent Park had a lot of taller towers and North Regent Park didn't. So it was a clear drop in who lived where. The connection between, the connection between the two communities strengthened feelings of safety throughout the neighborhood, allowing for community members to travel freely between the two without the building typology acting as markers of division. So a nice, smoother transition between where Regent Park residents are allowed to be in. I hope that all made sense. If you have any questions, that's a lot of information and background, so if you have any questions, now is the time to ask about that. If not, I'm going to assume I did a great job, and we'll keep going. So my methodology was very thorough, in my opinion. I did a lot of interviews, surveys, and I did a lot of crime data backstory. My CIP took a mixed methods approach focused on the three as you see over there. The primary sources of data were interview and surveys with community members. So that was what I focused on the most. And this research paper has defined community members as persons who have resided in Regent Park from phase 1 to phase 3. So throughout the entire revitalization process was who I focused my interviewees on. So a lot of my interviews were those who saw Regent Park before and after the revitalization to prevent very clear understanding of what changed. A survey was also dispersed to residents of Regent Park via social media, word of mouth, email, and various community group chats. The survey included 15 questions, of which 4 were mandatory demographic questions. The survey received 83 responses over a 2-month period, and the age range spanned from 18 to 65, with most responses received from the lower age range of 18 to 24. I gathered qualitative data on crime statistics from the Toronto Police Service Public Safety Data Portal, which is a mouthful to say, on Regent Park from 2004 and 2023. It's important to note that I wasn't really able to get crime data from before 2004 because I don't think they really had computers that they put their information into. A lot of it was, I'm assuming, handwritten, so they didn't really keep that data. So in that sense, my data is limited. The intention is to compare the rates of crime and physical safety with perceived safety, so the qualitative against the quantitative. This allowed for identification of connections between the rates of increasing and decreasing crime and the revitalization process, as well as accounts of perceived safety. Neighborhood crime statistics allowed for clear understanding on whether the neighborhood has statistically improved their safety rates. However, it is important to note that over-policing may present biased results in the data gathered. Specifically, Black residents have experienced tensions with the police. Therefore, the data will be analyzed alongside qualitative records noting individualized perceptions of safety. So I'm going to begin with my qualitative analysis. These 2 graphs are what I gathered from the crime data portal. Initially, the Regent Park shooting and firearm discharges, which is the data to the left. The graph shows initially no pattern, as it may be difficult to discern any improvements to Regent Park made by the revitalization. As you see, it goes up and down with no clear incline or decline. And a lot of the declines and inclines are very sharp. However, certain spikes and drops can be assumed to be attributed to specific community pressures. For instance, the drop in shooting and firearm discharges between 2019 and 2020 can be safely attributed to COVID-19 and the stay-at-home mandates. So as the crime begins to go down from 2018, 2019, and slowly goes and just kind of drops down with a small increase going up now. But that can, as I said, can be accredited to COVID-19.
So that also the home arrest, people are being, the boys, Black boys being home arrest, maybe that's also could be the factor?
You mean by like?
you won't see any activity because there is a crime, but they are being home arrested.
By stay at home or by the
By the police, yeah, they've been told, like, yeah.
I don't know much about that. I'm assuming though that condition would have been there regardless of COVID-19 or not, so I can't attribute that specifically to COVID-19. That could have been the case, but I don't have a specific connection because I don't know when that would have began, if that makes sense. But that is a true point. That's a good point. The increase in shootings and firearm discharges between 2005 and 2008, and based on my analysis, can be attributed to the displacement measures the initial revitalization did. So as I mentioned before, the phase 1 included a sharp incline of individuals who left Regent Park and never returned. And that may be the reason why crime has increased. As people in the crowd has mentioned before, knowing your neighbors is very important, how people feel safe. And when 50 or 60% of your community leaves, a lot of your safety networks disappear. And I think that is why the crime spike went up once the phases of revitalization began. Moving on to the second graph on the right. Although graph 1 illustrates high shooting and firearm discharge rates, graph 2 compares Regent Park with the city of Toronto over a period of 2 decades, so from 2004 to 2023. The highest neighborhoods include Glenfield, Jane Heights, followed by Black Creek and Mount Olive, Silverstone, Jamestown. Evidently, Regent Park is not included in the top 10. This may be due to a number of reasons, such as the fluctuation of crime rates throughout the 2 decades. However, one evident reason why Regent Park is not in the top 10 Toronto neighborhoods with the highest firearm discharge rates may be accredited to the revitalization. So instead of being top 10, it's top 11. The implementation of social procurement, inclusive communities, mixed-use development, and affordable housing may have played a part in this representation. However, out of 170 neighborhoods included in the Toronto Police Service data, Regent Park sits at 11. So out of 170, 11 is not that impressive for crime and firearm discharge rates. But all that shows is that community cohesion and crime are interrelated. And as such, in order to decrease Regent Park's crime rate, an incorporation of new design theories may be necessary. So these two maps show the crime rates and the intensity of crime rates and where they occurred between 2014 and 2018 and 2018 and 2022. So map 1 illustrates the intensity of crime rates related to specific geographic locations in Regent Park between the years of 2014 and 2018. As can be seen, specific geographic locations see intense levels of crime in comparison to other areas within Regent Park. Major intersections such as Dundas and Parliament, River and Dundas, and Sackville and Shooter see more criminal activity than internal intersections. More interestingly, redevelopment in phase 1 and phase 2 see lower levels of intense crime in relation to phase 3, 4, and 5. Comparatively, map 2 illustrates the intensity of crime related to geographic locations between 2018 and 2022. As can be seen, the rate of criminal activity has decreased significantly with a direct correlation to map 1. Major intersections such as Parliament and Dundas and Sackville and Shooter see a significant decrease in crime. As a decrease in criminal activity within this period can be related to a decrease in criminal activity within specific geographic locations, it can be assumed that there is a direct relation between crime and space. So this map, from what I assume, illustrates the intensity of crime, but it also illustrates that crime and geography are interrelated. And so in that way, crime and design are also interrelated because design and geography are one and the same, more or less. Moving on to my survey, I'm going to just walk through the demographics of who responded to my survey so you can get a full picture of my sampling size. Although the survey was dispersed to all residents of Regent Park, 42% of the responses state that they lived in Regent Park prior to 2004. So a majority, over 50%, who responded to my survey lived in Regent Park post phase 1 of the revitalization and not prior. Furthermore, the responses reflect the demographic of individuals who have responded. The majority of the age range of respondents were 18 to 24, which is 32.5% of respondents, and 67.5% were female. The demographic information illustrates that the survey respondents represent a small portion of the community in sampling size. These survey responses displayed several key insights about design, revitalization, and perception of safety within the community. So as you can also see here, resident categorization was also taken into consideration. So if you were a TCHC resident, if you are a condo owner, or you're a condo renter, I think those three identifications are very important because they also correlate, at least in some way, to income. If you are a condo owner, you are the most affluent of the three in the group, whereas if you were a TCHC renter, you would not, or resident, you would not be as high up in the financial hierarchy, in my opinion, or according to TCHC as well. Age demographics, as I mentioned, also play a part. If you are younger, you have more interaction with different criminal activity than if you were older. My interview themes include the following 5 main points. The way the interviews conducted with community leaders provide compelling information on the perspectives of safety and the relationship with urban design in Regent Park. When I did my interviews, I did 6 interviews. And so after each one, I wrote down the main key points that connected with me and that relate to my research question. And in the end, I put them all together and I categorized what themes I heard most and what was of most concern to the interviewees. I gathered these 5 points, which are police, safety, violent crime, design, and community. From the interviews and survey responses, the following findings emerged. So, finding 1, urban design fosters individual physical safety, but hinders community safety, which, in my opinion, this is my most significant finding and the one that took me most aback, the most surprising one as well. So 64.3% of residents state that they have experienced fewer safety challenges post-revitalization of phases 1, 2, and 3. This sentiment is echoed throughout the semi-structured interviews that occurred. However, when rating their feelings on a safety scale of 1 to 5, where 1 was completely feeling safe and 5 was completely feeling unsafe, the majority of respondents, which is 41%, state that their current feelings of safety resided at a 2. So this is not completely safe, but it's far away from completely unsafe. Similarly, when doing a similar activity for the opposite analysis, but this is specifically for 2005, and the phase 1 and prior to the revitalization, on a scale of 1 to 5, wherein 1 equated feelings of safety and 5 was feeling completely unsafe. The majority of residents, 33%, rated their feelings of safety as a 4. So if 5 was completely unsafe, it was a 4. Thus, while there is a clear evident shift in perceptions of safety, so you went from 4, which is unsafe, to 2, which is pretty safe, which is an increase in 2 points. This data illustrates that Regent Park residents consistently feel neither wholly unsafe, which is a 5, or wholly safe, which is a 1. This is particularly interesting as compared to the rest of Toronto. Regent Park has had historically high gun violence and crime rates, and thus are expected to feel wholly unsafe. Compared to the data I just showed you in the slide before, where Regent Park sat at 11 of neighborhoods who have firearm discharges, when you enter and you just talk to a neighborhood like that, you expect them to feel completely unsafe. But however, that's not the case, which is a really interesting finding in my part. The security and safety, despite statistically high rates of violence, represents an alternative community safety net, which is each other. The type of safety discussed in relation to design changed substantially throughout the revitalization. Respondents state that although they have felt safe in the past and they continue to feel safe, they have lost a sense of valued community. This is significant since, as noted by a previous writer I talked about, Urbanic, it is precisely these tight community connections combined with collective interpersonal mobilization that work to keep young residents out of trouble. So it was the connection between, it was mainly, honestly, these tight community connections that maintain the lower levels of crime from the youth in the neighborhood. So without this relational level of social protection, a degree of safety becomes circumvented via revitalization and design. So one of the major pillars of safety for youth has been fractured because of the way that the neighborhood has been designed. My second finding is that there is a miscommunication regarding the implications and significance of design. I found that Regent Park residents felt that the redesign of the community had little outwardly impact on their perceptions of safety. Other than lighting, which was discussed unanimously as a strong indicator of safety that affected their perception, respondents felt that design features such as setbacks, stepbacks, or building typology and design did not have a prominent effect on how residents viewed their safety. So this is not very encouraging to hear when you're doing a whole paper on design and safety. But when asked how the design of Regent Park prior to the revitalization affected feelings of physical and psychological safety, interviewees reported significant design features that affected their perception of safety, such as the physical shape and orientation of buildings and design of streetscapes. I found that many residents may not understand how specific design changes intend to directly improve perceptions of safety. For instance, interviewees reported that design features such as large setbacks and frontages reportedly made no difference in perceptions of safety. Conversely, respondents state that street animation had a large positive effect on feelings of safety. These two features are fundamentally linked. Street animation would not be possible without the space allocated for it through frontages and setbacks. Despite this, connecting the effects of safety and design to the community may be challenging. So while a lot of residents found that a lot of residents found that the street animation was was what helped them stay safe, they didn't understand what design practices made that occur. The lack of clear understanding can hinder the ability of community members to provide an advantageous feedback or improve the perceptions of safety in the community moving forward. So if you don't know how something has come to be, you can't adequately argue for it to continue. More specifically, communication on the cause and effect of design features and their theoretical relationship to safety should be improved upon. Not only can this provide a clearer understanding of the importance of design, but it can also strengthen the autonomy and decision-making capabilities of Regent Park residents. My final finding, before I'm almost done and I stop talking, is that residents' perception of safety does not align with statistical evidence. This is also something that I found to be really interesting. The survey that I gathered provides a range of safety challenges faced by Regent Park residents, which include assault, gun violence, drug dealing, theft, child endangerment, and street security. When the survey responses were codified, a pattern emerged in the perceptions behind the safety challenges Regent Park residents experienced. So this is what looks like a bunch of charts, but it's basically a lot of data I analyzed to see any patterns about who felt what, basically. Altogether, the top 4 survey responses concerning the biggest safety challenges experienced in Regent Park include gun violence, drug dealing, street security, and theft. Residents of all age brackets, except 65 and older, so seniors, which I found was interesting, viewed gun violence as a continuously prevailing issue in the community, despite Graph 1 prior, illustrating a dip in shooting and firearm discharges as reported by the Toronto Police Services. Moreover, assault did not have a high response rate despite recording the highest crime rate of all violent causes recorded by TPS as seen in Graph 4. These results may be due to the sampling size of the survey, as safety challenges and responses differ depending on if you are the TCHC resident or not, as well as the duration of your residence in Regent Park. As previously argued, perceptions of safety and criminal activity have a reciprocal relationship, wherein negative perceptions of safety incur an indirect negative effect on criminal activity. As such, the identification of the biggest safety challenges, as well as who is perceiving these challenges, is equally as important as the statistical data gathered. Given these responses, it is clear that Phase 4 and Phase 5 must address perceptions of unsafety despite diverging response from statistical evidence. So these perceptions and these feelings that residents feel, in my opinion, are equal to or even more important than the statistical data gathered by the police. It is perhaps specifically due to these divergences that a community-centered approach in addressing safety is necessary, or a community-centered design approach, in my opinion. Although specific design intricacies and their outputs are not easily understood or translated, community members demonstrate their own autonomy through the presentation of their ideas based upon their lived experiences. As such, when asked, how do you think safety challenges should be addressed, survey and interview respondents presented a variety of ideas that either directly or indirectly address design. Throughout the interview process, I found that this question received drastically different responses based on the lived experiences of the individuals I interviewed and their subject of interest. In understanding my findings, I turned towards an abolition lens to format recommendations for design output in Regent Park for phases 4 and 5. Abolition, in the way I'm discussing it, refers to advocacy and a strengthening of community connectivity with design as a main mechanism or methodology. It is important to note that a neighborhood does not need to be designed a certain way to foster community. Community influences design and not the other way around. As such, looking into planning abolition for insights into how we can address community safety with design as a tool and not the reason should be the way forward. Furthermore, in incorporating an abolitionist lens in design planning, solutions to specific respondents' belief can be more holistically addressed. This last section is a work in progress, so I would love to hear your non-conventional design initiatives that improve community safety. If you have any thoughts, feel free to let me know. From this discussion and a reflection of my findings, 3 to 4 recommendations will be produced. So that is my final output. It's my whole report and about 3 to 4 recommendations. I will leave you with this last question. So, listen up. What is your definition of community care? What role does community involvement play in your overall definition of success? And how do you see that manifested in your community? You don't have to answer that. You can just sit with that. And I'll also leave you with this final quote that someone in my interview said and really stuck with me. There needs to still be improvement in work, but we don't give up.
Can you have a chance to people could ask the question?
The question before?
Yeah.
That's not, you can answer it if you really want to, but it's not necessary. I just want you to sit with that and really we can discuss after if you would like. But yeah, I'm just gonna finish this quote. There needs to still be improvement in work, but we don't give up. We will still keep going and going and going and do what needs to be done. It's hard, but it's just one day at a time with safety. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and listening to my presentation. We can always go back and discuss any points that you thought was really important to you, and anything you want to add, it would be really important to me as well. So thank you. Did you have a comment?
So yeah, do you think that for the community safety or community well-being, in order the community to rise, the connectivity will help them than just focusing on planning the building and focusing on building, than focusing on more investing in the people?
Yeah. I think that is a really good, that's a really important thing that planners need to know, that the community kind of guides. Thank you. The community guides the people, the residents guide the community and not the other way around. I think that what I'm trying to do is use design as a way for the community to say how they would like to be designed, and not the other way around, if that helps. But I do want to note that design or only one way of planning is not gonna answer the question or be the result that you need. So
yeah, in order to grow the community, if you are living within your own connectivity that you have, connection that you have,
yeah.
There is not going to be any growth. You need, especially we are in this century, you need connection in order to overcome the poverty or the challenge that the community have. And if you are living within your circle and you cannot come up out of the poverty or the challenge that the community that exists, you need to have connection outside of your community to overcome the challenge that exists within your community. If you are just if you stay within your circle without networking or without having outside connection, how do you overcome the drug issue, the gun violence issue, poverty, and all of the stuff that exists?
I think that's one of the main reasons why the mixed income or the social income part of Regent Park was pushed forward. There was an idea that if you lived with someone who was your neighbor who was a lawyer, you would get more networking opportunities and leave poverty, correct? is what I think you're pointing to. But I think one of the main problems is that we're seeing a lot of affluent people move into the neighborhood and not have a lot of connectivity with their neighbors. So you're losing, for instance, if I had a neighbor who's also low income and they moved out and someone who's high income with good connections moved in, there would be almost no interconnection and no sense of community between us. And that was the main problem that a lot of people who are interviewed stated, where you'd find people moving in, but they move in and be very solitary. So there's no point people moving in if you can't make those connections. So there'd be a lawyer living next to you and not helping you, if that makes sense. So I think that was the main problem, where you have the intention of social income, mixed income helping, but then it would stop there and it wouldn't continue into community. And so I'm hoping that through design in any way that can change, but I understand your point. Yeah,
the way they design also, like the condo will be by themselves and they have their own amenities. They will have everything there, and why do you need outside?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's like a clear division between who, like they intended to make a social mixed income, but there's a clear division between where the rich live and the poor live. And that's not only in design, but it's also in what they put into these buildings, which I guess is an attribute of design, and it needs to be changed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember one of the guy came from New York a couple of years ago. Oh, this is good, he said. Like, I'm not sure what he saw, and he said, in the States, the poor have different elevators within the same buildings. The rich people have their own elevator. Like, oh, this is good, he said. Okay, this is good for you, what you see in here.
Yeah, I think when you're used to, like, not much, a level up is impressive, but now that we have that, there's always space to ask for more, which I think is important.
I think also like the people who move in, like they have to feel safe to mingle with others. Yeah,
that is true.
I have a question. As someone who grew up here and is now studying about the neighborhood, was there anything when you were researching or searching up like that surprised you that was different from your current opinion about the neighborhood?
I think it was the type of crime that other people experienced. So a lot of the people I interviewed were just older than me to like very much older. So it ranged, I think the youngest person I interviewed was in their early 20s and the oldest was, well, the majority were in their 40s. And so they've been not only in Regent Park longer than I have, but they've been exposed to different types of crime earlier than I have. That makes sense, because I was, like, in comparison, a 7-year-old won't be exposed to as much crime as an older person would. And so when I'm talking to them, a lot of the crime they experienced took me aback. I was like, oh, I didn't know this took place in the same community I did growing up. Even knowing that, like, obviously it's in the news and whatnot, it's different hearing from your peers about what they experienced and what I had no idea of occurring. So that was really interesting, which I think is important because it ties into like who you're designing crime for also well. So it'd be different for a 7-year-old and a 40-year-old. Any other questions? No worries if not. Go ahead.
What was most surprising about your findings, did you think, that took you aback or enlightened you?
What do you think?
I would say, well, my first two findings are my strongest, and I think that's because it took me so far back. I was like, why? Then I think finding two, which was, let me see if I can get there for you. I think, it was this one. Yeah, that there was a miscommunication regarding the implications and significance of design. I thought that was really interesting because Regent Park residents are known to advocate for themselves and push for what they believe in. And I thought that this specific disconnection was interesting because they'd gotten so far without knowing the academic aspects of design. And I was kind of inspired into thinking how much further can they go with knowing with not being held back from the academic jargon or the academic knowledge that they could have gathered. So I think that was really important to me. Yeah, thank you. The end. Sorry.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on all our social media platforms. And if you need more information, go to our website.